Hi everyone. So we are the Pine State Readers, and today we have a controversial topic.
And today we're going to be talking about books that we refuse to read.
And books that we think that are overhyped and simply not worth the read.
There's some books on social media that get a lot of hype and love that I just don't really understand. Frankly, I am a pretty picky reader, and there are some genres that I'm just really not interested in. But for the most part, I'll read anything out of any genre if it's recommended to me. But these books on my list are books that I just have no interest in reading for various reasons. So the first book on my list is one that's pretty popular on Book Talk, or at least it was in 2024 and 2025. It's called A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It seems like a pretty good book, and I was originally pretty interested in it from social media, but the more I looked into it, the more I was turned off by it. I'm sure it's a really brilliant book and very touching and poignant, but it seems like too much for me. The more I looked into it, the more I was pretty disgusted by the things in the book. The book discusses in very graphic and detailed explanations of the main character Jude's past struggles with sexual assault and their current struggles with depression and self-harm and PTSD and substance abuse and things like that. And I'm not one to shy away from difficult topics. I have my master's in history, so I've read plenty of very egregious things that have actually happened. However, I don't want to read a fiction book that's just awful, horrible, terrible trauma after trauma after trauma that just goes on and on and on throughout the book. And it's like, man, can the main character catch a break? Like, I just don't want to be reading such a heavy book in my free time. I feel like I wouldn't be able to handle all of that emotional trauma in that book. I think it's one of those books that would just haunt me for months, and I just don't think I could handle it.
So I'm personally not really a picky reader. I think I will read any genre, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. But in order for a book to be qualified as like non-readable for me, it has to be written by an author I do not like, or that means I don't like the context within the book. But here's a trigger warning for this next book that's coming up. It has some child abuse and neglect in it, so just be mindful whenever going into this next part of the video. So this book is a memoir that follows the life of Dave Pelzer and one of California's worst child abuse cases from the 1960s. And in this memoir, we have Dave recalling his experience living with his abusive mother, and then also his bystander father who doesn't do anything or really help. So this book starts off when Dave is taken away from his family around the age of 10 when he goes in 5th grade. So everything that takes place in this book happened when he was in 5th grade and prior to that. Like every story that starts out with an abuse case, it seems like one of the parents turns to alcohol for some unknown reason. That's kind of a lot of what starts this abuse, starting from his mom. And she primarily uses Dave as a target, but it starts off small and then it grows really fast into some pretty gruesome things. A couple of those is she would beat him, she would break his arm. There would be times where she would starve him days on end. Dave would look for scraps in the trash. Since his mom found out about this, she would put ammonia into the garbage can that would intentionally make him sick. She would make him vomit, and then she would make him eat that vomit. But the whole time, his father didn't do anything. Like he said, I give up, I can't do this anymore. Knew everything that was going on, but just left him for no reason whatsoever. This wasn't even the worst part of the use, because the mom would force him to eat feces, and then when he didn't do that, would smear all over his face. So with everything that's gone on, the story concludes with Dave drawing attention to the importance of staying vigilant and recognizing abusive children. And he also lingers on the point of joining and working with organizations such as CPS to help children get the help they need, have them taken care of, because he comes from such like a troubled past. I like the idea of Dave getting his story out there and bringing attention to the topic of child abuse, and I think it's really important for people to do something like that. But I just don't think that I would want to read specifically about how it happens and what happens. I feel like it brings up a lot of like troubling memories. I'm also a child from foster care. I didn't experience abuse quite that bad, but it was pretty bad. And I feel like this would kind of be like a triggering book for someone who's kind of been through a similar situation. But even if I didn't have a troubling past, I still think it would be hard to read about a mom doing all this to their own kid. But I just think like it's a pretty heavy book, and I don't think I would ever be in the right headspace to read it.
So Switching gears to a lighter topic, A Court of Thorns and Roses. This book series by Sarah J. Maas is very popular on social media, and not gonna lie, I'm not really a big fan of fantasy or romance, but I did look into it because it was so highly recommended by so many people. But the more I looked into it, the more I was turned off from reading it. Very similar to the first book on my list. I'm sure this is a really comfortable and casual read, and it's probably very relaxing, but I don't care for very overly casual reading. I like books with more complex plots and themes and things like that. This book series is just a flat out no for me, unfortunately. From my understanding, the writing is pretty subpar, the characters are quite flat, and the plot is pretty abysmal. Apparently there's a lot of romance and erotic scenes, but from my understanding, the main character is like a 19-year-old girl, and the other male protagonists are like a lot older. And I've heard that there's some controversy over some of the situations in the book being more like sexual assault than like romance, and that's already pretty problematic for some younger readers, and I'm not really interested in reading that, especially if it's supposed to be a fantasy book and yet the plot is kind of subpar in exchange for, you know, more romance and erotica. That's not really what I'm looking for in a book. I think it's just not really my kind of book. It's totally fine if that's your cup of tea and you like this type of casual reading. I'm sure it's very compelling, but I just feel like it's not for me.
Unpopular opinion, I didn't know anything about that, but I wanted to read it anyways because people like it for a reason. I feel like when things are popular, it's for a good reason. Either like the plot's good or maybe the characters are good or something about it. I'm a big fantasy reader. I read Lord of the Rings. I really like The Hobbit, and also read some Stephen King where there's some fantasy involved in it. But I like fantasy. I like the world building of fantasy. And I kind of like book series sometimes whenever they go on for like a long amount of time. I feel like it's a good way of world building, but regardless of what she's saying, I want to read it. I think it would be a good book. And the covers are so pretty too. It looks really nice on the bookshelf. But after that, oh my goodness.
I'm not opposed to reading fantasy. I do like some fantasy books. I just feel like if that's the genre I'm looking to read, there's probably better options out there.
So my second book on this list is called Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance. And this is one of those books that I don't agree with because he isn't really from Appalachia. I don't like this book because I feel like it looks down on the region and its people of Appalachia. And I feel like his book kind of reinforces that negative stereotype that Appalachian people are dumb or stupid and they're in their situation because they're lazy and their ancestors didn't want to get out, they want to be poor. So this is a book written by the current Vice President of the United States, James David Vance. It acts as a memoir that talks about James's life briefly growing up in Appalachia until moving to the suburbs of Ohio. He joins the Marines for a couple years after high school and then goes to attend the prestigious Ivy League, Yale. He goes through the book talking about being surrounded by a spiritual disease that would plague the Appalachian people's mind. He generalized the working class and claimed they wouldn't do anything to help themselves to get out of their situation, while also ignoring his privilege of being white and middle class to help his own situation. Vance also paints his experience as the only one that truly matters when he lived in Kentucky only for a couple years and the rest of his life in Ohio. He calls Appalachian people stupid for not getting out and blames their ancestors for not leaving the area, while completely ignoring Appalachia's long history of exploitation with the coal mining and lumber industries, to name a couple. James comes off as an ignorant, tone-deaf, and pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of person and misrepresents the realities of living in Appalachia. This book is a piece of propaganda that perpetuates false ideas of poor people in Appalachia while having surface-level analysis with hardly any living experience in the region. It plays into poor people are poor because they chose to be that way.
So the third book on my list is more like two books. It is the two most famous books by Ayn Rand, however you want to say it. It's called The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. No shocker here, but I fundamentally disagree with all of Rand's ideas. The stories in these books don't sound interesting, and her monologues are ridiculously long to the point that they are just obnoxious. And from what I understand, she relies very heavily on these monologues to tell her stories rather than telling the stories through plot and characterization and dialogue. She just uses monologues to push her ideas through these books. And her theories and ideas in this day and age are pretty much mostly rejected by scholars, and her books and ideas are pretty much only popular in the United States. They never really gained traction anywhere else, and they really gained popularity among conservatives, especially during the anti-communist Red Scare during the Cold War era. So much of her ideas in these books promote what I would call today hyper-individualism, which is putting the interests of the individual over the interests of the collective. And I would argue that this type of thinking is what has led to this moment that we're in right now of extreme conservatism, concentration of wealth, general disregard for other people, and extreme competitiveness. So all in all, I really have no desire to listen to her monologues or try and make sense of her incredibly contradictory ideas.
So these are our top 5 books that we refuse to read. Again, these are just our opinions. So let us know if you agree or disagree down below in the comments, and we'll catch you later. Bye.